Hey chaps, Speed Inkling here. So I think it's pretty obvious that I'm a fan of the Sonic series. It was the series I made my first video on, and I've made more videos on it since. The most interesting of the Sonic games is definitely the 3D ones, whether they be some of the greatest 3D platformers out there, or unforgivable train wrecks. And today, I'm going to rank them from least favourite to my favourite. This will be a very personal list, as the games are ranked based on my personal experiences, and how much fun I had with each entry. The only rules is that you have to be able to play as Sonic, and only mainline series games. So Sonic Boom Rise of Lyric and the racing games will not be on here. So with that said,
let's do this!
Okay, as you can probably tell by that opening, I really hate this game. After Sonic's impressive run in recent years, to see it crash to this was extremely disappointing. But before I rant about this game, I will give this game some credit. On a technical level, this game is fine. I've only ever suffered one death from a glitch, and the cartoony art style of the game is gorgeous. It's just a shame the game is boring to look at. Welcome to New Super Sonic Pro. The visuals of the stages are so boring and uninspired, and lack the wow factor the other games in the series have. The music isn't much better. A lot of it just sounds generic and uninspired. But visuals and music are the least of this game's problems. The controls and physics for this game are awful. Not necessarily on a technical level, but definitely for the franchise. They gave Sonic a run button, which defeats the whole momentum thing this series has had going since the first game. Sonic himself just feels stiff. As such, he lacks the flow that he's literally had in every other 3D Sonic game. That's bad enough on its own, but it's not helped by the absolute worst lineup of levels I've ever seen in a platformer. Every stage usually has something new. As such, every stage had its own problems, whether it's bland design, stupid amounts of scripted sequences, outright bad design, the gimmick of the stage itself, or just absolutely everything. Also, how about those boss fights? You know, the ones where about 90% of them can go down in about 2 hits, and they barely have anything to them. It really takes me something to make me this mad at a game. It feels like every concept idea they thought of was actually kept in, resulting in an overcomplicated, frustrating, and poorly executed game. It's not the worst game ever made, far from it, but it's easily one of my least favourite games as a whole. Sonic Lost World is easily the rock bottom of the series for me, and when you hit rock bottom, you can only go up from there. When I first found out about Forces, I was interested. The apocalyptic tone the game was going for was something I was open to, but as I saw more of the gameplay nearing its release, I began to lose interest in it. And by the time the game came out, I expected the game to just be meh, and I was partially correct. Sonic Forces offers 3 different styles of gameplay. However, whilst they're technically fine, they all have their problems. One problem they all have is issues with their momentum. It can be very inconsistent. Sometimes they can barely move once they jump, and other times they go flying halfway across the stage. It's not too bad with modern Sonic or the Bird avatar as they have a double jump, but with classic Sonic and non-Bird avatar, a lot of the platforming sections can feel like a luck of the draw, and it's not like the platforming sections are even interesting. I can barely remember any of them, and half of them are just rehashes from previous games. The 3D sections aren't much better. These are some of the blandest sections I've seen in a platformer, usually just being straight lines with some enemies to plow through. It's almost like they didn't even try here, and it honestly feels like that. Quoting YouTuber TCS Gaming, Sonic Force is like something that other Sonic games have, and that's heart. And that's a pretty good way of describing it. The levels are lazily made, and almost every single one of them can be beaten in under 2 minutes, and 20 seconds of these levels can often just be quick time events. They didn't even try to make the levels interesting either. Even if you're a Sonic fan, there's nothing worth your time here. Now we're on to the games where I can find some good in them. Sonic Adventure 2 is one of the most treasured games in the series, so when I finally got to it last year, I was both excited and skeptical. But unfortunately, a lot of this game just felt like a slog to get through. Some of the speed stages are fun to blast through, like Green Forest, White Jungle, and Final Rush. Absolutely love Final Rush, by the way. But the rest just feel bland in design. Half of City Escape is just running down linear roads. There's also Pyramid Cave, where half of it is just running down tunnels and going through rings. It's not interesting, it's just boring. As for the other gameplay styles, the shooting stages are not very good. They're incredibly slow, and just amount to mostly basic platforming and shooting down waves of enemies. It's especially annoying in Tails' case, as he'd be way more fun running around and flying. That was a massive missed opportunity to have levels built around his flying, but the worst of the bunch is easily the treasure hunting stages, for two reasons. One, these levels are fucking huge, meaning you can be spending ages trying to find the emerald shards, and two, the game wants you to find the emerald shards in a particular order, so you could potentially go right past one without even realizing it. I mean, the first game did the Emerald Raider fine, so what's this game's excuse? With the exception of Pumpkin Hill, these stages were just a nightmare to deal with. The game's inconsistency is definitely its biggest problem. If they had just taken the running stages and made the game just around those, this could have been much higher, but the game is filled with hit and miss gameplay and levels, and unfortunately, a lot more misses. So here's the first 3D Sonic game I actually ever played. This was actually one of the free games that I first got with my Wii, and I really liked it at the time. But coming back to it 10 years on, it's really not held up. The game plays a lot differently to other games in the series. Instead of free movement, this time Sonic's on rails, and I can't really say I'm a very big fan of that. But it's the levels and the method of progressing through the story are the big reasons that this game is low. Only some of the missions are required to get through the main story, and it's never made clear which ones they are. Which is annoying, as some of these missions lead to the world rings that you need to get to the true final boss. And it's not like the levels in these missions are interesting either. Most of the levels involve Sonic just going down linear corridors, using the motion controls to steer him away from obstacles. Unlike most people, I actually found these motion controls just fine, but the levels themselves start off really bland. When the difficulty starts to increase in the later stages, they can actually get pretty frustrating. If there is anything positive I can say about these levels, it's the visuals and the music. For an early Wii title, the visuals are really pretty, and the soundtrack is incredibly catchy with some of the best vocal songs in the series, but good visuals and music doesn't save mediocre gameplay. The main saving grace of this game is the party mode. Yeah, I actually really like this mode. I had a lot of fun with it, even if some of the minigames don't really work properly. But aside from that, there's really no reason for me to go back to this game. From this point onwards, all of these games are ones that I like. And yes, that does mean I like Sonic the Hedgehog. However, it more falls into the guilty pleasure category, as the game itself is pretty bad. However, there are some things in this game I actually really like. When the game isn't being glitchy, or spending 20 seconds playing itself, I actually really enjoyed the level design. I had fun climbing the buildings in Crisis City, and exploring the beaches in Emerald Coast 2.0. I also had some fun with every single character, and none of them I found to be anywhere near unplayable, with my favourites being Sonic, Shadow and Blaze. I honestly wish Blaze had her own campaign in this game. Also, with Sonic, you could completely break the game with his gems, and that was a blast. The soundtrack is also something I can heavily praise. In fact, it might just be my favourite soundtrack in the series. They all fit the stage they're in amazingly and are incredibly memorable. Honestly, the thing that bothered me the most throughout this game was the hub worlds. It was agonising searching endlessly throughout the whole area looking for a star on the map, usually because of the stupid townspeople or a police force that will give the police force in England a run for its money. And the boss fights in this game are also the worst in the series, like Iblis Worm, and actually, do I need to mention anything more than this? If it wasn't for those, this game and the next would have swapped positions. But with some fun gameplay and levels, and one of my favourite soundtracks, I can get some good enjoyment from this game, and that's more than I can say for some of the earlier entries on here. From one guilty pleasure game to another. This game actually plays out more like a hack and slash rather than a platformer, but it works really well. Unlike previous games we've seen, the swordplay, which is this game's main gimmick, actually works really well with Sonic speed to give us one of the fastest hack and slashes out there. It is seriously satisfying slashing through tons of enemies at really fast speeds. The level design is also a massive step up from the previous storybook game, with fewer cheap moments and more interesting level design. Also, can I just say how phenomenal the visuals are in this game, especially for a Wii game in 2009? It perfectly fits into the medieval times, and the way the cutscenes are done are beautiful, taking the storybook aspect of the last game but making it more animated, and it looks incredible. As for the plot, I really liked it for having the best plot twist in the entire series, which was instantly followed up by some gorgeous CGI animation. The soundtrack is also one of the best I've heard, with some of the best stage themes and Crush 40 songs in the series. I'm so happy they're coming back for Team Sonic Racing. Whilst the game is technically flawed, incredibly short, and doesn't really offer much outside of the swordplay, it's still an insanely fun game that I can still come back to, but I can't find myself to put it any higher because of its flaws. So after the interesting last game, Sega really needed to up their game for the next entry. So what do? Take the successful boost formula from Rush, make it 3D, and throw in DeviantArt at Halloween. This game has two very different styles of gameplay, the high-speed daytime stages and the combat-heavy nighttime stages. I really like some of these daytime stages. The high speeds you can get are thrilling, there's some fun platforming, the visuals are stunning, and goddamn those stage themes. These are some of the best stage themes I've ever heard in a video game. The daytime stages are far from perfect, and they were improved upon in later games, but they were a blast to go through. However, the nighttime stages really hold it back. Their extremely long length got really annoying at times, they felt very repetitive, and at their worst, they're actually some of my least favourite stages in the whole series, Shaman Night. Basically, this game is just a whole mix of thrilling and boring, but I am glad this game was made, as the daytime stages gave Sonic a working formula that was improved upon in later games, such as... Throughout the mid to late noughties, 3D Sonic did not have a good time. There were some that were okay, but most of them got lukewarm reception at best, and scathed at worst. But then in 2010, Sonic flew past everyone's expectations with flying... I normally don't care for plots for Sonic games, but I really liked how it was told here, with some really well written dialogue that I actually found really funny at times, and the tone of the story also applies to the gameplay. The whole place takes place in an amusement park in space, which is one of the coolest ideas for a setting you can think of. All of the moves from Unleashed are backed, and the level designs can really take advantage of them. Not necessarily in the 3D sections, as most of them are kind of bland until the end, but definitely in the 2D sections. What makes the levels fun for me is this game's new main gimmick. New to this game was the Wisps, and this is the best gameplay gimmick in years, and the first one since Heroes to execute the gimmick well. With this, Sonic can temporarily change how he plays by giving him the moves he's had for ages. Okay, in all seriousness, I loved using these to discover new areas. Can I also just say that this game is actually on the Wii? How they managed to make the likes of Tropical Resort and Starlight Carnival look that good on that console is amazing, and the soundtrack is really good, containing some of the most memorable tracks in the series. While some of the 3D sections are kind of bland, and several of the bosses were underwhelming, Sonic Colors is still an awesome experience, and an easy recommendation for anyone who has a Wii. So after Super Mario 64, other franchises started making the jump to 3D, including Sonic. Now I haven't played Sonic Art yet, but from what I've heard it isn't very good, and a poor start to Sonic's 3D career. Thankfully the next year, he finally got somewhere. The visuals are outdated, the collision is awful, and Big the Cat is one of the worst gameplay styles in the series, but there's so much more this game gets right. I absolutely love the Sonic levels. It does a great job of balancing speed and platforming. Like seriously, there are so many fun platforming challenges in these stages. As well as this, there are so many nooks and crannies to find if you keep an eye out for them. These are easily some of the best 3D stages in the series. Tails is also fun to play as, even if his flying can break half of the stages. His stages all involve racing someone to the goal, but his flying means he can pull off multiple shortcuts. Tails' final mission with Dr. Eggman was especially fun, as it really took advantage of his flying. I also enjoyed Knuckles' style of gameplay. Unlike in the sequel, the levels are smaller, and if you're near any Emerald Shard, the game will let you know. Amy and Gamma's gameplay, whilst not as strong as the previous three, still offer some fun with their platforming, with their robot chases and shooting segments respectively. One thing I really liked about these campaigns as well, is that they all ended with some of the best boss fights in the series, especially the Egg Viper. Whilst this game has definitely aged in some areas, which could have cost it second place, there are still many areas that do still hold up to this day, and are still incredibly fun to play through. So as you've seen, some gimmicks within the 3D Sonic games can really fall flat. The thing is, they often don't work well with Sonic's speed. We saw the sword play working with the speed earlier, but there is another gameplay gimmick that not only works with Sonic's speed, but has more than the gimmick going for it, and it's one of the most creative platformers I've played because of it. Now we're really getting into the good ones. Sonic Heroes dominated my early teenage years. Instead of just playing as one character, now you get to play as three at once. It's very simple to change as well, just requiring a tap of a button. It was nice to have some of Sonic's friends along with him, and Sonic actually gives a good life lesson here. Basically, you just do everything yourself, and use your friends when you need them. And there are some sections where you will need them, so the levels do take full advantage of this gameplay. And this leads to one of the strongest lineup of levels in the series, with the exception of... Every single one of these stages are a lot of fun to go through, and have incredible soundtracks. Whilst I will admit this game is far from perfect, as the characters can be slippery, there's some annoying stage gimmicks, replaying the same game 4 times was retarded, mostly underwhelming boss fights, and the worst controls in the series in the special stages, but the stuff this game gets right, it gets really right, and it heavily outweighs the bad. Probably my favourite game on the GameCube. To anyone who knows me, you probably saw this coming, but to those of you who haven't, you can probably work out from process of elimination that Sonic Generations is my favourite 3D Sonic game, and it's not even close. Released to celebrate Sonic's 20th anniversary, and honestly, I don't think there was a much better way to celebrate it. But before I get into why I love it so much, let's get out of the way what I didn't like about this game. They did a poor job replicating the classic Sonic physics, and the final boss sucked. Okay, that's literally all I have to complain about, because everything else about this game is absolutely fantastic. Other than the physics being out, the classic stages were a ton of fun. The platforming sections are bliss, there's plenty of opportunities for speed, and there are a ton of alternate routes for replayability. I'm still finding new routes to this day. What's better is that you can unlock power-ups, like the elemental shields from Sonic 3, and bring them into the stages. And since there are plenty of power-ups to try out, there is tons of replay value to be had here. But what puts this game at number 1 is the modern stages. The high-speed sections are thrilling, the platforming is bliss, especially in 3D, and the exploration is through the roof. Modern Sonic may not have as many power-ups to use as classic Sonic, but the modern stages are still insanely replayable. This is overall easily the strongest lineup of levels in the series. What's also the strongest lineup in the series is the boss fights. The rival battles against the other hedgehogs are amazing, and the perfect chaos fight is a joy to go through, cleverly using modern Sonic's capabilities. Throw in the best visuals in the series, sweet remixes, and a ton of fun challenging stages, and you have a package that's hard to top. This has been Speed Inkling, and Side Generations is my favourite platformer of all time. Thank you for watching, and stay awesome.